All right, today we're going to dive into something, well, pretty mind-bending. It's a concept from a model called the harmonic scale framework, and it proposes this idea of a hidden stabilizer for reality, a fundamental field they call K4 that could be the engine running literally everything we see. Just imagine for a second, what if some of the biggest puzzles in physics, I'm talking about mass, the forces that hold atoms together, even gravity itself, what if they could all be explained by just one single hidden mechanism? Yeah, that's the wild idea we're going to unpack today. Okay, so before we can really get our heads around the solution this framework is proposing, we've got to understand the sheer size of the problems it's trying to tackle. So let's just take a quick look at some of the huge unanswered questions that keep physicists up at night. Physicists are dealing with some really deep stuff here. Like, why do particles even have mass? Where does it come from? And what's the deal with the strong nuclear force, the thing that literally holds the nucleus of an atom together? Then you've got neutrinos. What even are those weird little things? And maybe the biggest one of all, why is gravity just so incredibly weak compared to the other forces? I mean, it's not even close. So yeah, these are the exact puzzles that the K4 field is supposed to solve. All right, so enter the harmonic scale framework, or HSF for short. It comes along and suggests, hey, maybe there's one single answer for all of that. And that answer is the central unifying idea of a hidden layer to reality, something it calls the K4 field. So what exactly is this K4 field? Well, according to HSF, it's not some kind of weird energy that fills up all of space. No, it's actually a standing wave system that exists inside of every single physical object. You can almost think of it like the main battery pack for matter. It's the energy depot that holds almost all of an object's rest mass energy. Yeah, a really good way to picture it is as the invisible internal body of an object. It's like the unseen skeleton or framework that gives it substance, gives it mass, and keeps it stable. And this is a really important point. This is not just a reboot of the old ether theory, some field that fills all of space. Absolutely not. The framework argues that the K4 field is the internal energy structure of the object itself, so it's a part of the matter, not the space it's sitting in. That's a huge difference. Okay, so if it's an energy depot, how does it work? How does it actually function? Well, the main idea here is picture a reservoir. The whole process is basically about that reservoir filling up and then eventually overflowing. Let me walk you through it. So first you have a system, let's say an atom, and it settles down into a more stable, lower energy state, right? Now, the energy that gets released, it doesn't just vanish. It gets soaked up and stored by this internal K4 field. But, and here's the key part, that field has a limit. It can only hold so much. It can get saturated. And once it's full, any extra energy has to go somewhere. It overflows and gets shot out as particles, like photons or neutrinos. And right there, that whole overflow idea, that is where this framework really starts to connect the dots. It's how it tries to explain some of those huge puzzles we talked about earlier, especially the strong nuclear force and the whole mystery of what neutrinos are. So let's talk about the strong force. This theory gives us a totally different way of looking at it. You see, the standard model says it's a fundamental force carried by these little particles called gluons. But the HSF, it says no, it's actually an effect. It's what happens when two of these internal K4 fields overlap. That overlap creates this deep, shared, stable energy well. And that's what we see as the incredibly powerful force holding a nucleus together. Okay, that brings us to the next big claim. We said that overflow energy can be emitted, right? So what happens if the internal structure of an object changes really fast? And what does that make a neutrino, according to this theory? This is where things get really wild. The HSF model completely reimagines what a neutrino is. In this view, it's not a fundamental particle at all. Instead, a neutrino is a literal fragment of the K4 field's wave pattern. It's a piece that just breaks off and flies away when an object's internal structure changes so suddenly that the K4 field can't quite keep up. All right, so we've gone from the tiny nucleus all the way out to neutrinos. Now let's zoom way out, because this framework doesn't stop there. It also tries to use this internal K4 field to explain the biggest force we know, gravity. So how on earth does it explain gravity? Well, the theory goes like this. There's a bigger cosmological field that interacts with just the surface of an object. But it doesn't push the object directly. Instead, it just gently nudges the internal K4 field, causing it to slowly change its shape. Then, the rest of the object, its actual physical parts, just follows the lead of its new K4 body. And because this whole process is so slow and indirect, we experience it as a really, really weak force, and we call it gravity. So when you start putting all these pieces together, you can see that the K4 field isn't just some minor component in this theory. The framework is really positioning it as the central engine, the thing that drives physical reality on every single scale. I mean, just look at the ambition here. At the particle level, it's holding their rest mass energy. For atoms, it's setting their stable energy levels. Go up to the nucleus, and it's defining the limit for binding energy. And then at the cosmic scale, it's responding to a bigger field to create what we call gravity. It's positioned as the one universal stabilizer for everything. But of course, this begs a massive question, right? If this K4 field is so important and does everything, why can't we see it? Why haven't we detected it? Well, the theory's answer is that it's the silent foundation. It's buried so deep inside matter, and it doesn't really interact with the electromagnetic force, which is how we see pretty much everything. It works through structure and phase, not light. And that leads to this really powerful final metaphor. The K4 field isn't one of the violins or the trumpets in the orchestra of reality. No. According to this framework, it's the quiet conductor at the front, making sure every other piece plays its part in perfect harmony. And that's where we're left, with this huge, profound question. Could it be that our entire universe, from a single atom all the way up to a galaxy, is actually being governed by an invisible internal architecture? Is there really a silent conductor guiding this whole cosmic symphony? That's the truly provocative vision of reality that the harmonic scale framework asks us to consider.